What if I told you that during the darkest years of the Cold War, the United States had a plan to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon? Not for science, not for exploration, but simply to show the world its power. This was Project A119, a plan so secret, so bizarre, that it remained buried in classified archives for decades, and it nearly happened. The story begins in the 1950s. The Cold War was escalating. The Soviet Union had shocked the world with Sputnik in 1957, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. Suddenly, America was behind in the space race. For US leaders, this was more than just science. It was a battle of prestige, ideology, and global influence. So, the US Air Force began looking for a way to strike back. Not with rockets, not with astronauts, but with a show of terrifying force. Their idea? Send a nuclear warhead to the moon, detonate it on the surface, and let the world watch as a glowing mushroom cloud rose above the lunar horizon. The plan was codenamed Project A119, and only a handful of scientists knew about it. One of them, a young graduate student named Carl Sagan, who would later become one of the world's most famous science communicators. But back then, he was helping calculate how the moon's thin dust would react to a nuclear explosion. It sounds like science fiction, but in the 1950s, this was deadly serious. The Americans believed such a detonation would accomplish three things. 1. Intimidate the Soviet Union by proving US nuclear superiority. 2. Reassure the American public, who feared they were falling behind in technology. 3. Demonstrate dominance in space, showing the world that America could weaponize the heavens if it wanted. But here's the terrifying part. This wasn't just a wild idea on paper. The Air Force drew up real plans. Scientists ran calculations. Even the exact timing of the detonation was discussed, ideally when the moon was a thin crescent, so that people on Earth could clearly see the blast silhouetted against the dark side of the moon. Imagine it, the entire world looking up at the night sky and seeing a nuclear explosion bloom on the moon. That was the vision of Project A119. And if not for secrecy, caution, and fear of global outrage, it might have actually happened. This is the untold story of how close humanity came to turning the moon into a nuclear test site. To understand Project A119, we need to step back into the world of the 1950s. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in an ideological war. On one side, democracy and capitalism. On the other, communism and authoritarian control. But beyond politics, this conflict was being fought with weapons, science, and symbols. When the Soviets launched Sputnik 1 in October 1957, it was a thunderclap across the globe. The small beeping satellite wasn't dangerous by itself, but it sent a clear message. The Soviets had mastered rocket technology. If they could put a satellite into orbit, they could just as easily send a nuclear warhead across the world. In Washington, panic spread. Newspapers ran headlines about America falling behind. Citizens feared Soviet dominance in space, and by extension, on Earth. President Eisenhower's administration scrambled for a response. The U.S. would go on to create NASA in 1958, but military leaders wanted something bigger, bolder, and more intimidating. They wanted a demonstration that would echo across history. Thus, the Air Force quietly assembled scientists and strategists to brainstorm spectacular demonstrations of American power. Some ideas were absurd, dropping colored dust on the moon to make it glow, launching massive mirrors to reflect sunlight onto Earth, or exploding conventional bombs in space. But one idea stood above them all: a nuclear detonation on the moon's surface. Why the moon? Because it was a universal symbol. Every culture on Earth looked up at it. A nuclear flash there would be seen worldwide. It would say, "America can touch even the stars." The timing was crucial. Scientists proposed detonating the bomb when the moon was a thin crescent, so the blast would silhouette against darkness, visible to billions without telescopes. It would be part science experiment, part propaganda theater. And it wasn't just about the Soviets. American leaders wanted to reassure their own people. Fear was spreading that the U.S. was losing technological superiority. What better way to silence those doubts than by blowing up part of the moon? But behind the grand ambitions lay deep fears. Scientists knew this was not a game. A nuclear blast in space could have unknown consequences. Dust clouds could linger, changing the moon's appearance. Fallout wasn't an issue, but political fallout could be catastrophic. Still, in the fever of the Cold War, logic was often drowned out by desperation. And so, Project A119 was born. Once the idea was approved, the Air Force began assembling experts to turn fantasy into reality. The project was officially given the dry title, A Study of Lunar Research Flights. Internally, however, it became known simply as Project A119. Its mission was clear: find out if detonating a nuclear bomb on the moon was possible, and if so, how to make it as spectacular as possible. The team included physicists, astronomers, and mathematicians. Among them was a young man named Carl Sagan, then a PhD student at the University of Chicago. His task was to calculate how lunar dust would behave during a massive explosion. Would it rise into space? Would it settle back down? Would the glow be visible from Earth? Others worked on the technical side. How big should the bomb be? Too large, and it would be difficult to deliver. Too small, and it wouldn't produce the terrifying spectacle the military wanted. The consensus was to use a warhead roughly the size of the ones dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Then came the delivery problem. Rockets in the 1950s were still unreliable. The Air Force considered modified ballistic missiles capable of reaching the moon. Precision was essential. The warhead needed to impact the lunar surface at just the right angle and location for the explosion to be seen from Earth. The plan grew increasingly complex. Timing was everything. The moon had to be in the right phase. The sky conditions had to be clear, and the detonation had to happen at the edge of the lunar disk, where sunlight would make the blast visible against the dark void. For scientists, this was both thrilling and terrifying. On one hand, they were pushing the limits of human technology. On the other, they were working on a project that could permanently alter humanity's view of the moon. Behind closed doors, questions multiplied. Could the explosion damage the moon's surface in ways we didn't understand? Could it alter its orbit, however slightly? Could it send radioactive debris into space? No one truly knew.
But in the climate of the Cold War, uncertainty often took a back seat to spectacle. By 1959, the plan was detailed enough to be feasible. The only step left was approval.
Why not detonate a nuclear bomb in space, or on Mars, or even on Earth's orbit? Why specifically the moon? The answer lies in symbolism. The moon has always been humanity's universal mirror. Every civilization, from the Mayans to the Chinese, from the Greeks to the Navajo, has revered the moon. To touch it, even with violence, was to declare dominion over nature itself. The Air Force planners understood this. A blast on the moon would not just be a military display. It would be psychological warfare aimed at billions of human beings who looked at the night sky. There were also practical reasons. The moon is close, only about 240,000 miles away. Unlike Mars or Venus, it was reachable with the rocket technology of the 1950s. And unlike detonating a bomb in Earth orbit, a lunar explosion would not risk contaminating our own atmosphere. But the most important factor was visibility. Scientists proposed that the explosion be timed for when the moon was a thin crescent. That way, the blast would occur along the dark side, creating a dramatic silhouette against space. The goal was not secrecy, it was theater. And this is where Project A119 becomes almost surreal. The US wasn't planning an experiment, they were planning a performance, a cosmic fireworks show powered by nuclear energy. But not everyone agreed. Some scientists voiced concerns that the blast could change the moon's surface in unpredictable ways. Others feared it would backfire politically, making the US look reckless rather than powerful. Still, the military pressed on. To them, the risks were worth it. If the explosion worked as planned, America would become the first nation to literally leave its mark on another world. Think about it. Before Neil Armstrong's footprint in 1969, there could have been a radioactive crater left by a nuclear weapon. That could have been humanity's first step into space. The moon, humanity's silent companion, almost became humanity's first battlefield.
But even as plans advanced, a shadow hung over Project A119. The dangers. First, there were the scientific risks. While the moon has no atmosphere, it does have a thin layer of dust and rock fragments called regolith. No one truly knew how it would behave under a nuclear blast. Would it scatter harmlessly? Or could it launch massive plumes of radioactive debris into space, creating a hazard for future space missions? Second, there were the political risks. Nuclear weapons were already controversial on Earth. The idea of using them in space was unprecedented. What if the Soviets responded by detonating their own bomb on the moon, or worse, in Earth's orbit? Third, there was the risk of failure. Rockets in the 1950s were notoriously unreliable. If the missile carrying the warhead malfunctioned and crashed back to Earth, the result could be catastrophic. Imagine a nuclear weapon exploding not on the moon, but in Kansas. And finally, there was the moral risk. Scientists, even those working for the military, were troubled by the thought of turning the moon into a nuclear target. The moon was not just rock, it was culture, myth, poetry. To scar it with a mushroom cloud felt like sacrilege. One man who later spoke against the project was Carl Sagan. Though he worked on calculations during the study, he later became one of the strongest voices against the militarization of space. His career as a science communicator often returned to the theme: space should be a frontier of peace, not destruction. Inside the Pentagon, the doubts grew. The project was daring, but it was also dangerous. And by 1959, other strategies were emerging to win the space race. Rockets, satellites, and the dream of manned missions seemed far safer than blowing up the moon. Project A119 was inching toward cancellation. By late 1959, Project A119 reached a crossroads. The plan was feasible. The calculations were in place. The rockets, though risky, could have been adapted. But the decision-makers began asking the most important question: was it worth it? In the end, the answer was no. Several reasons led to the project's quiet death. First, public opinion. If news of the plan leaked, it could trigger outrage, both at home and abroad. The U.S. positioned itself as a defender of freedom. How would it look if it nuked humanity's moon? Second, the political risks were too great. The Soviet Union might respond with its own cosmic display, escalating tensions even further. The Cold War was already dangerous. Adding nuclear fireworks to the night sky could push the world closer to Armageddon. Third, by 1959 and 1960, new strategies were taking shape. The U.S. realized that the true way to win the space race was not through destruction, but through exploration. The idea of sending astronauts to the moon was already being discussed. Blowing it up would make that dream pointless. And finally, there was the growing moral understanding that space should remain peaceful. International talks were beginning to frame outer space as a place for science, not warfare. Nuking the moon would have destroyed that fragile vision. So, Project A119 was shelved. Files were locked away. The world never knew how close we came. But here's the twist. The Soviets had their own version. Declassified documents later revealed that the USSR also considered detonating a nuclear weapon on the moon for propaganda purposes. Both superpowers had the same insane idea, and both walked away. It's chilling to think humanity's first act of space exploration could have been a nuclear strike.
Today, Project A119 is a forgotten chapter of history. For decades, it remained classified. Only in the late 1990s, when documents were uncovered and interviews conducted, did the truth emerge. The revelation shocked people. How could the U.S. seriously consider nuking the moon? The idea seemed absurd, reckless, even insane. Yet, in the Cold War, insanity often masqueraded as strategy. Carl Sagan's involvement gave the story another twist. The man who became the world's most beloved science communicator once helped design nuclear explosions on the moon. It was a reminder that history is messy, and even great figures have surprising pasts. But the legacy of Project A119 runs deeper. It shows how fragile our relationship with space truly is. At the dawn of the space age, humanity nearly turned the heavens into a theater of war.
Instead, by a mixture of caution, fear, and luck, we chose exploration instead. A decade later, in 1969, Neil Armstrong would step onto the moon and say, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." But imagine if the first mark left there had been a nuclear crater instead of a footprint. Humanity's story in space could have started not with peace, but with fire. In the end, Project A119 teaches us a haunting lesson. Sometimes the greatest victories are the disasters we avoid. And it leaves us with a question. What secrets of today will future generations look back on, shocked that we even considered them? This has been The Lost Chapters, where forgotten stories come to life.
History is full of secrets like this one. If you want more strange, forgotten, and powerful stories, subscribe to The Lost Chapters and never look at history the same way again.